Coming up next on the Cultural Connections podcast, making a difference globally through architecture. We'll be joined by Rick and Laura Brown, co-founders of Hands House Studio Incorporated. This episode is being recorded live on Monday, October 4th, 2021. This is the Cultural Connections podcast.
And hello, everybody. My name is Brian Nimes, and I am the producer and the host of the Cultural Connections podcast. Before I introduce our guests today, I want to remind our viewers that we are recording this episode live on Monday, October 4th, 2021. Now, normally we are live on 3 different platforms: Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. As some of you may be aware, especially if you're watching this episode live today on Monday, October 4th, Facebook is currently experiencing a massive outage. So as I am hopeful that we are live streaming this on Facebook right now, and I will continue to periodically check, I cannot guarantee that our live stream is uploaded on Facebook right now, but regardless, the recorded version will appear on Facebook. Nonetheless, we're still live on Twitter and YouTube. What does this mean? It means that if you, as our viewer watching right now, have a question you would like answered, and you would like our guests today to answer that question, you may comment below either right now on Twitter or YouTube with your questions, and we will be sure to answer them live right here on the podcast during the next half hour to 40 minutes that we are live. So without further ado, today we have a very interesting topic for you. We're going to be discussing, as the title alluded, making a difference globally through architecture. And we're joined today by 2 people who know that area very well, Rick and Laura Brown, a husband and wife duo who are co-founders of Hands House Studio Incorporated. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what I always do when I start my podcast, I always have our guests introduce themselves a little further, obviously, than what I did. And we'll start with the both of you giving a little bit of a background about yourself. We'll start with you, Laura, telling our viewers a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I am a trained sculptor, and I have been been on the faculty at Mass College of Art for the last 25 years. And so I have been teaching sculpture in an art school forum. I've been a builder prior to that and up to this day. And actually, I met my partner, Rick Brown, over 50 years ago while at undergraduate school at University of Georgia. And we've been together since then, building and creating our life together. I'll let Rick take from there.
So I'm Rick Brown. Also, I have 2 fine arts degrees in sculpture and also a master's degree in architecture. And Laura, as Laura said, we both met in college, and both from the beginning had a real interest in making and learning by doing, and so our partnership began 50 years ago, and here we are today, still making and learning by doing.
That's excellent. Moving on here to our next question then which is really what we're talking about, is architecture here. We'll start with you, Laura. We'll ask the same question to both of you here. What sparked the interest in architecture? What got you interested in it?
Well, the interest in architecture evolves from an interest in building. So, I mean, architecture is a component of building. Basically, the world of construction, of process, of materials, of tools, of actually making your own world evolved into actually doing years of making our home, literally building and living in probably about 20 different homes as a family. We would build them, buy them, fix them up, and sell them. And then with sculpture, which is not architecture, but there is, a crossover between architecture and sculpture. And now we're making historic architectural objects through Hands House Studio. So that's kind of my linkage there.
Yeah. So I think first of all, and sort of fundamental to the way Laura and I think and sort of navigate our way through life is we like to learn by doing, and we also are interested in learning about a lot of things. And so we have a very broad interest. And, again, we met in art school and we were very attracted to sculpture because, again, sculpture and so art in general doesn't have it's not finite. It's infinite. It has all unlimited possibilities of what it can be. And that was very attractive to us from the standpoint that we were interested in lots of materials, lots of processes, lots of techniques. And so over the years, our interest in making sculpture and also working again in a wide range of ways of working, we were attracted to architecture because again, architecture it's a building process. It's manifested in a sort of physical form, and also it's it's one of the most richest subjects to study about the history of people in the world and people and so it has an anthropological aspect. It's just unlimited possibilities for what you can experience and learn and study. So that's we're very and I think that's fundamental to how we live, trying to build our own world through understanding the world.
And I'm going to add that actually a lot of the a lot of built structures throughout history, architecture, the word architecture was not necessarily even a part of their consciousness, and it has come out of that. Whereas the process of making making a structure would have been embedded in the builder as the designer, the architect, and the maker. So we kind of fall into that broader scope of architecture.
That's great. That's absolutely great. Well, you mentioned it in the middle of your answer there. You mentioned your, which we also alluded to at the beginning here, your organization called Hands House Studio Incorporated. Can you tell us a little bit more about Hands House Studio and how it came to be and what it is?
Well, I'll start and then I'll let Rick wrap it up.
Sure.
Hands House Studio is a nonprofit educational organization that creates hands-on learning projects to invigorate art, history, science, kind of a multidisciplinary way of looking at the world of the built world. And an educational way. We strive to integrate different subjects and put together students or learners is what I like to call them, and experts who have not done what we're actually suggesting to do, or creating something that's never this lost to history, and replicating it, rebuilding it, diving into what it is, how it was made, who made it, with what tools, and why. You're kind of reverse engineering and rebuilding history and rebuilding the knowledge that those objects have embedded in them. And it was a way to take the classroom outside of the classroom, to take it outside of a singular subject, and to create dynamic learning environments for all kinds of people to participate in and learn in, and broaden the idea of what learning through doing means. So you can take it from there.
Well, one of the things, as Laura said in the beginning, we've been teaching since the 1970s, and but we've never really perceived of ourselves as teachers, but more as facilitators for learning. We like the idea of creating the term dynamic learning environments, where you bring people together under the same roof with the same objective of replicating an object. And the whole idea is to make this kind of special environment for learning. And so, again, as Laura has mentioned, our projects, they're not limited. They're very open, and so they're very inclusive. And so we try to bring in historians and educators and scholars, sometimes the leading scholars on a particular subject. We bring in design professionals and artists and traditional builders and then students, all under the same roof, working shoulder to shoulder. And it's what people realize is that is the power you have when you are collaborating, and sharing the knowledge, and everybody has something to offer. And it's not uncommon for again, scholars who are really maybe noted as a leading authority on a subject, to say how much they learned by working with students who are beginners, because of their curiosity and their point of view and the questions they ask. And so that's what creates this fantastic learning dynamic. And once you've gone through a Hands House project from beginning to end, it's not uncommon to hear people say that it was a life-changing experience.
And there's another component that we like to do, is not only take it outside of the classroom, but have the project expand beyond the workshop itself through exhibitions, through lectures, through film, through social media and demonstrations. And so it goes, way beyond even the original group of people that gathered.
Basically, the way we do is you have an idea. You start with an object, and the idea is you're going to replicate it as accurately as possible. And then you let the learning dynamic take over. So, students, whoever's participating, creates a sort of their own lines of inquiry. So it takes it off into all different kinds of possible ways of looking and analyzing the history, the subject. And that's what makes it so it wants to expand and grow. And so again, the project takes you where it needs to go. So it's not uncommon for us to get an idea, and the next thing you know, you're traveling around the world to find an answer to a question that you only can find if you go to that particular place where it was built, and try to reach back into the history of where it was at the time it was built.
Wow, very fascinating. Very, very fascinating. And before we go further, I want to remind all of our viewers again that you're listening or watching to the Cultural Connections podcast. We are talking with Rick and Laura Brown, who are a husband and wife duo, and also the co-founders of Hands House Studio, as we talk about making a difference globally through architecture. And we want to remind you that we're accepting your questions right now. We know that we are live on Twitter and YouTube. Unfortunately, due to a outage with Facebook, we are not able to be live on there, I don't think, but hopefully it is still transcribing over to Facebook, but otherwise it will be uploaded then there later on. So if you have questions you'd like answered throughout the duration of the podcast, it will be live for probably another 25 minutes or so. You can comment below with your questions and we'll be sure to answer them. My next question to you is, you had a lot of notable projects through Hands House Studio that are listed on your website. And one of them that really pops out that a lot of people would be interested, including myself, to hear more about, is the project you did with doing some of the rebuilding of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France, that I think a lot of people know suffered a devastating fire a couple years ago, and you guys are involved with helping with the rebuild. Can you tell us more about that project?
Well, I can tell you, this might inform you about how projects begin.
Yeah.
In April, I think it was April 15th, 2017, even when it was being broadcast on television, the fire at Notre Dame, and people all around the world were in complete shock to see this iconic Gothic piece of French Gothic architecture on fire. It was just again, people were stunned. And even right in the beginning, I had at least one phone call saying, this looks like this is going to be a possible next Hands House Studio project. I mean, they meant that in a serious way, not in a cynical way. And because this is what Hands House does, we see something that's maybe lost or nearly lost in history, a historic object, and that's kind of a perfect project for us to undertake. And so early on, we were considering creating a project. It took us a little bit of time to actually get ourselves gathered to do it, because we were already involved in some other projects. But the first thing we did was we thought if we're going to do this project, it's a French project, and we're here in the U.S. and we want to make it into, we want to do something that's going to be significant and at the same time not too aggressive but sensitive to what happened. And so we thought what we would do is we would try to replicate one of the wooden trusses of the roof section of the cathedral. And so what we did is we contacted, we thought we should contact somebody in France to give ourselves a foothold in France and create a partnership. And we found out about an organization called Carpenters Without Borders. And they are an organization similar to Hands House, and they're in France. And what they do is they try to preserve the building trade of timber framing. They're specifically interested in timber framing, but we found out that in fact they had been involved in a project here in the U.S. Building a blacksmith shop with some timber framers from the U.S. And so I went to the online and found their roster, and on the roster there were at least 3 people that had worked on our project we had done in Poland a few years ago. So I started calling them, and they all were very interested in this idea we had. 2 of them spoke French, and so they had offered to and they knew the director and founder of Carpenters Without Borders. So we created a Zoom call, and we told them that our idea was we wanted to replicate one of the wooden trusses, and our first objective was that there was a discussion going on in France about whether to use contemporary designs and materials and processes, or and well, that was what they actually had sort of projected they were going to do. But the public quickly responded saying, no, the public wanted to be replaced as it was done originally, and that's what we were trying to advocate. And then also we wanted to do the project as a way to demonstrate an act of goodwill and a kind of a sense of global solidarity among traditional builders, and so as a way to sort of build the camaraderie and the kind of the passion for rebuilding Notre Dame in a positive sort of international way. And so the director Francois Calem, he liked the idea. He thought that the French would also respond to that in a positive way. And so that was very important for us to have that initial acceptance and collaboration. So the next thing I did was I said, to do this in the US, we're an organization with some credibility around the world, having reproduced a lot of significant objects. But nothing, we hadn't done anything related to the Notre Dame Cathedral or this specific piece of architecture. So we thought we've got to establish ourselves in some sort of way. And so what I did was I contacted the National Building Museum in Washington to ask them if they tell them about our project and say, would they be, if we built this, would they be interested in exhibiting it in the museum? And they immediately said yes, because of course they're a building museum, and because of the significance of this historic object, and also some of the grandeur of the project. Even though it's just a single truss we were replicating, because there are many trusses in the entire roof section of Notre Dame, but even though it's a single truss, it's quite large. It's like 45 feet wide at the bottom. It's a triangle that goes up about over 3 stories. And they have a great hall in the National Building Museum, and they really like to show big objects in their great hall. So they were all behind this project. So then I thought, okay, then they also recommended that I contact Catholic University, which is not very far from the museum. They said Catholic University has an architecture program, and it's very likely they would be interested in this project. And so I did exactly what they suggested, and I contacted a young faculty member, Tanya Onstad. She's a architecture faculty member, and she was the acting associate dean. And she responded in the same way that the French did and the way that the Building Museum responded. She said, this is a fantastic project. yes, we want to be involved. And so count us in. And so then now we had a kind of a local partner. We also just began discussing all the possibilities of what we could do, with working with Catholic University. And one thing was we were trying to establish where we actually would build our trusts. And she said that it's very likely that they would want to build it on their campus. So we met with their dean, and again, he was completely behind the project. And so we proposed that we would build it there on their campus, and that way our crew that would come from all around the country could stay in their dormitories, and also we could eat in their food facilities, and have a wonderful site right there to build it, and to work with their students who, in fact, we decided to create a summer class, and so everything was working in a very positive and synergetic way, exactly like we like Hans House projects to evolve. And so we had such positive response in so many respects. But now, so far in that, what I was described is that we would build it and raise it on the campus of Catholic University. But it's not so ironic, but Catholic University has, adjacent to Catholic University is the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, which is the largest Catholic church in America. And so that was a great adjacency and affiliation and symbolic connection with the cathedral in Paris. And then we had the National Building Museum. So then we also approached the National Park Service, actually the National, was the Preservation's, help me, Laura.
Preservation Trade Center.
Yeah. The Preservation Trade Center is part of the National Park Service. Yeah. What it is that they train young professionals to restore all kinds of facilities all around the American National Park Service.
They are training to do kind of what we're doing with Notre Dame, restore historic structures in the National Park Service in the accurate way. So they're learning skills that actually they were very interested in, the skills that would be learned making the trust. So we partnered up with them, which was part of the National Park Service, and they arranged for us to do a raising on the mall.
Okay, so what this is, we called what we did was, so now we had 3 high-profile venues and a great collaboration in France for this project to kind of take off. And so Tanya offered a summer class. She attracted students from around the DC area, and so they produced a large body of research and analysis and models, and then they also participated in the actual building process. We also contacted professional timber framers from all over the U.S., as far west as California. And we had about
25 to 30 professional timber framers. We had a whole class, traditional carpentry class from North Bennett Street School in Boston. And we had several other architecture students involved. So, I mean, in all, we had about 60 people to make this truss in 7 days.
So what we did is, to date, what we've done is we, in a total 12-day workshop, we with that group, we replicated the full truss, and then we raised it, which is a term for actually lifting it up in its upright position. And we did that on the campus of Catholic University, across from the Basilica. And then we, 2 days later, we took it to the National Mall and raised it on the mall, which is, that's like America's front yard. And we raised it in between the National Monument, Washington Monument, and the Capitol building. And again, very representing the United States of America. And then we took it to the Building Museum and installed it there with an exhibition that students had put together and the National Building Museum put together at Hans House, which included models and drawings and historic interpretation. And that was on exhibit for about 6 weeks.
Yes.
And it just came down about a week ago.
A lot in less than a year.
Yeah. So, you know, it had, we call it the triptych exhibition, which is Catholic University, the National Mall, and the National Building Museum.
Now, how do you get this over though to if it's built here, how do you get it all the way across the ocean and sent over to the Notre Dame?
Okay, well, that's a fair question, but it's actually it's more simple than it might appear. What we do is timber framing is an ancient building method. It goes way back in history in lots of different cultures. Basically, it's large timbers with joinery that can be put together and taken back apart
In pieces.
back into pieces. So that's what we did when we did the first raising at Catholic University. Then we lowered it back down to the ground, took it apart, and put it all together as linear pieces that fits on one truck, and drove it to the National Mall. We'll do the same thing to go to France. We'll take it down. Well, actually, we already have it. It's in storage right now. We take it down, put it on a truck, take it to a ship container, and ship it to France. And then over there, it'll be retrucked to a new location, reassembled, and hopefully.
The hard part is getting permission to do that.
Yeah.
So all of that, we're working with our connections in France, and it's still in they know it's there. They've responded, and we're working to
get their final confirmation.
Get confirmation or permission. And so this is an outreach.
Wow, impressive! That's the only word that comes to mind, that you can get that done in that short period of time. Thinking about all of you've had a lot of different, not just at the Notre Dame. There's been lots of projects that people can explore on your website, on the Hands House website. But is there one project that comes to mind recently of your recent projects, because you've done a lot, that you're most proud of, and you're most proud of the accomplishment of that?
Well, the Notre Dame one is very exciting, and it's actually, I feel it's in the beginning of it. I think there's more to come for that one. It still has more possibilities down the way. The project that I have to say is not only is the most memorable, and is probably the most significant to this day, to this moment, is the project we did in Poland about the wooden synagogues. And it was a very long, that was about a 11 or 12 year project, starting with models and workshops. It's a project to rebuild, replicate full scale one of the wooden synagogues of Poland, wooden Jewish synagogues of Poland. They were all destroyed by the end of World War II.
18th and 19th century.
Wow.
In their 18th and 19th century,
17th and 18th.
17th and 18th century log structures with roof structures and painted interiors. So they were. The only thing that remained was documentation done by actually architecture students and professionals, photographers, anthropologists. Toward the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century, and the beginning of the 20th century, before World War II. So that documentation was kind of strewn or almost lost during World War II, during the invasion of Poland. It was regathered, put together by a single couple, and then was not very well known throughout the world. And the project came to us. It's a project for about a log structure and wooden roof truss structure. So it's kind of it is a wood structure. And we became involved. It's a long story, but we worked on it for 11 years, doing through classes and workshops and travel programs to Poland. And it culminated in the Museum of the History of Polish Jews contacting us, asking if we would make a full-scale replica of one of the synagogue's roof and painted ceilings for their museum that was being built in Warsaw. At that time, it was 2010 9 that they contacted us. in 2011, 12, and 13. We built the structure over 3 summers. And then in 2014, and actually over 300 people participated in just that part of it.
The last 3
Wow.
summers.
The last 3 summers, there were, hundreds of people in classes and workshops that were involved in gathering the research and the pre-work. And so that's a project had a huge base of participants, students, learners, experts, scholars. And it also then resulted in an exhibition that's still a permanent exhibition in the Museum of the History of Polish Jews in Warsaw for the world to see. And it also has a full film about the process and the project. So that's kind of the breadth that we envision these things so they can start, singular and just explode over years, over time, to be very significant results that tell the world about something that was lost.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible, and it's amazing to see that come to life. My next question to you is about how we all were impacted one way or another in March 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic, when it really first came to life, and that's when the initial shutdown really happened. How did this impact your project and impact in general on you completing projects and in general with the work you do? How did the COVID pandemic impact your work?
Well, it's had a definite impact on Hans House projects because, what we try to do is we try to bring people together.
Right.
Fundamentally, we're trying to bring lots of people together, which is fundamentally what you don't want to do in a pandemic.
Right.
So we've had, for example, we were developing a fantastic project in Thailand. We were working with a couple of organizations there, an architectural organization and historic organization there, with planning to actually build a traditional Thai bamboo village. And unfortunately, that whole project has been kind of gone to sleep because we can't travel there and we can't bring the people together to do that. So that's one example. In the U.S., we've had we've actually been taking projects like we have a class we would call Toys for Elephants, designing objects to enhance the quality of life of animals in captivity. But the problem was, again, that's bringing students together, working in tight quarters in closed studios. And so we actually morphed that into, instead of Toys for Elephants, we turned it into a class called Toys for Monkeys. And because for monkeys, they're they're smaller. The elephants require a much larger object, and monkeys are much smaller and also not as complex to build. And so that gave us a way to continue doing some Hans House projects and visualizing them. And they've been successful, but it's quite different than what we were doing before.
And those projects, we actually moved into working with high schools, two local high schools, to do Toys for Monkeys virtually. So it was a virtual hands-on project. And so that was with Norwell High School and Lakewood High School.
Yeah, and that evolution actually was very positive, and those schools are excited about what we did, and they want to continue. So that's an example of where the pandemic caused us to have to reassess what we were doing and sort of reinvent it and come out with another success story. But it's still quite different than the momentum we had for 10 years of designing and building for elephants. So and then there's just the whole idea of the complexity of the pandemic and different attitudes about vaccinations and masks and how to create protocol for working together. So that it presents very.
It's been a big learning event for us.
Yeah,
Of course, I bet.
But I do feel that actually the downtime with COVID actually created the enthusiasm and will to for the National Building Museum, Catholic, all these to come
Right.
together and make this happen. So it kind of created pent up energy.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely true. That's what a good pandemic can do for you. I want to, before we go further in our last around 5 minutes or so here on the podcast, I want to remind our viewers that are watching or listening that we are recording that you're listening or watching the Cultural Connections podcast live on Monday, October 4th, 2021. We're chatting with Rick and Laura Brown, who are the co-founders of Hands House Studio Incorporated, talking about architecture and making a difference globally using architecture. So if you have questions you'd like answered and you're watching live, you can either comment on Twitter or on YouTube. Unfortunately, right now, Facebook is experiencing an outage. Therefore, our live feed, we're not able to get access to Facebook. And I don't know that we are actually live on Facebook, even though I'm constantly checking. Regardless, it will be up there to watch following the broadcast. So my next question to you is about the educational collaborations you have with which is a rather large list that you have on your website of different educational collaborations that you've made with different universities, organizations, etc. Can you tell us a little bit about those collaborations you've made and how you came through to work with making all these collaborations? And I'm sure the list continues to grow the new projects that come forth.
Well, I'll start and then I'll let you wrap it up. We're a small organization, but we have big ideas. So you have to, we're very interested in expanding and bringing as many people into the process as we can, as can be done. And that allows not only the numbers of people to expand, it allows the capacity to do things bigger than you, that are bigger than you can imagine to happen. It kind of allows it to be to do ideas that takes a lot of organizing and resources to put together. So what we try to do is also put together organizations that wouldn't necessarily be working together, and then they become linked in ways that are they're not necessarily like parallels. I mean, they don't necessarily have the same crossovers, but that we become the crossover. And so there's a lot of time in talking and idea development. It's a very labor intensive process, and it takes sometimes years to develop what your big idea results in.
So for example, I'm just going to give you an example of how the collaborations occur. Because, like, for example, with the synagogue project, one of the first things we decided to do to become knowledgeable in this history of these over 200 synagogues that had been destroyed during the Nazi invasion of Poland, the first thing we did was we decided that we would create a class at Mass College of Art where we teach. And we just create a class to make a model of one particular synagogue. And so when we did that, that class was attracting students from architecture program, design program, the sculpture department. You're bringing together these different disciplines within the college, so it becomes interdisciplinary, and you start to get those kind of connections. And then as soon as that model was made, what we did was we thought, okay, now we have this very large, impressive model. Let's put it on the road to sort of popularize our project. So we found another institution, another college. In this case, it was Oberlin College in Ohio. And right after that, it was University of Minnesota. And the idea was they would exhibit that model in those institutions and get it out, out into the public's eye. And so in other words, so then you're bringing those two institutions, and then also because Laura and I are not we're not Jewish scholars, and we're not historians. What we do is we bring in scholarship that can give real credibility to the project, and an authentic scholarship to the big idea. So we went to, in both of those universities and colleges, we went to and said, can you provide somebody from your institution who is a Jewish scholar or somebody who might know about the history of Eastern European Jewry or the history of Poland or the architecture of the region. And so then you start to bring in scholars and again, people with credibility in that way. And you just keep building it, kind of snowballs. Each time you have an exhibition and you have a workshop, a demonstration, travel program, each of those keeps bringing in more and more entities to empower the project. And it's not hard to do. It's actually quite easy to get people interested. The problem generally is financing them and finding some way to finance it. But anyway, so it's the collaborations is something that's a very important part of what we do, and it's also something that's kind of unique about Hands House because, for example, Hands House has the ability to, an idea might come to us, and really require that you do it right away because it's relevant to do it right away. Just like with the Notre Dame Cathedral, if we did this project 5 years from now, it wouldn't have the same meaning as does doing it right now. And so the colleges and universities can't really necessarily work that quickly, to create new curriculum and create a project that's going to be exhibited and bring in lots of people and lots of scholars. But Hands House can do that. So we can turn on a dime. We're very nimble. We can move very quickly. And so we happen to be a good partner for institutions that have, set curriculums, and we can create a course overnight. And that's one of the things that has made us very effective, because we can put together a class, put together exhibitions, put together projects, bring in lots of entities, and do it very quickly.
And we also have an inventory or a group of alumni, Hands House alumni that come forward and give a lot of their time. There's a lot of volunteerism, and Hands House is very generous with how people can share in the project. We don't own it, we share it. And so I think that's something that's very important, and to give credit to all the variable organizations and what they've contributed and how they've contributed, and not just have it, kind of isolated. So it's opening up. It's like, saying everybody is important, everybody contributes, everybody learns. And so it brings it beyond just the walls of Hands House.
No, definitely incredible. It's incredible everything that you're doing. My next question to you within the last few minutes that we have is going to be talking about a little bit about some of the upcoming projects that you have. Again, as we've alluded to, you have a lot of projects. Can you tell us just a little snippet of some of the upcoming projects that you have upcoming?
So first
We're tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's probably the right answer. But the
wrapping up is what
we have lots of ideas for projects. We don't like to just we like to bring them up when it's the right moment. But I will tell you that right now we're deep into the Notre Dame project, and it has another kind of round of iterations that we're nurturing right now around the country, different institutions we want to bring in, and so it's an ongoing project, and it's going to have a life for at least a year or so out. And so that's one we're definitely focused on at this point. But also another one I'll mention is that a couple of years ago we started a project, the Trojan Horse. We were researching. Sometimes our ideas come from ourselves. Sometimes they come from outside sources. And this is one that was presented to us for another museum. And I won't mention them because I just don't want to put them on the spot. But they wanted a replica of the Trojan Horse, which is a really fantastic project because of its history. And the fundamental question is, in fact, did it actually ever exist? So that adds another kind of a learning dynamic that's pretty valuable, I think, for for a student experience, to find things, do research and to find ways to give, credible evidence that in fact that it did happen. And so,
I mean, it's such a potent subject because it has so much, it's like you think of, there's so many ways the word Trojan horse is used in literature and, politics and all kinds of things, but what was it, what happened, what is the actual history? So, so it's something that we have stirred up and have some capacity to take it forward if there's interest. And so that would be a wonderful one to carry out. There's some other ones that we kind of have in the early stages. I would say the China, what's that? Anyway, no.
the China, what she's talking about is we've explored the idea of doing a replica of it's a Chinese bridge called the Rainbow Bridge. And so we've done some early, we actually offered a class at Mass College of Art and got that project started right during the pandemic. And right before. And so that has been also put to sleep. And so, so we, that's right now, right there, that's 3 possible projects.
But one that is ready, primed to go forward is not a physical making project, but making a website. We call it the digital, Geborgit's digital website for all the archival information and work that we did on the 12 years of the Geborgit Synagogue project. We have a huge amount of visual information that actually we would like to make available to the public, that we need to create a website for. So that's kind of something that's needs funding, but is in this beginning stages.
Absolutely. It's all very impressive. And I can't believe I have to say this, but we're already out of time for today, just like that. It's amazing. I say every time I do this, I feel like the time goes faster and faster each time I do another episode of the Cultural Connections podcast. So again, I want to thank Rick and Laura Brown, husband and wife duo, the co-founders of Hands House Studio, for joining me today. If you'd like to learn more about their projects, you can check out their website at www.handshouse. That's HANDSHOUSE.org. Or you can get in contact with me and I can send you the link. You can reach me directly by emailing me at brianives@gmail.com. That's BRIANIV as in Victor, ES @gmail.com. And if you have questions that you would have liked answered that you didn't get a chance to ask today during the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me again with that email directly, and I will get your answers to your questions for you. Again, that email address is Brian Ives, BRIANIV as in Victor, ES @gmail.com. If you have suggestions for future episodes of the podcast that you'd like to submit to us, please again feel free to reach out to me at that same email address, brianives@gmail.com. Thank you again to Rick and Laura Brown for joining me today, and we will see you again next time on the Cultural Connections podcast. I'm Ryan Ives, and I'm the producer and the host of the Cultural Connections podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for watching this episode of the Cultural Connections podcast. For more information on today's episode, be sure to check out our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also watch this episode again in its entirety on our YouTube channel. This podcast is also available on listening platforms Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Breaker, Radio Public, and New TV. Thanks again for watching this episode of the Cultural Connections podcast.